At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's General G. Let's begin. The two teams of engineers stood on opposite sides of the royal palace of planet Zorar. Henry Lee and his crew kept shifting their gazes between their diagrams and the work of the other team across the chamber. The rivals were NIVs, 7 of them, checking equipment and polishing their sales pitch. Both teams were about to compete for a deal worth billions of credits to supply Zorar with their battle armor, and the chamber's air became just a bit thicker every time their gazes met. Lucas, the lead technician, moved behind Henry in slow steps, his fingers making the final adjustments to the armor's neck seal. The metallic sounds echoed in the vast chamber as he tightened each connection point. "Active stealth module is green across the board," Lucas muttered, more to himself than to Henry. His breath was warm against Henry's ear as he leaned in to check the neural interface connections. "Aimbot systems are calibrated to your reflexes. Should give you a 0.7-second advantage on target acquisition." Lucas stepped back, wiping his hands on his work cloth before tapping the side of Henry's helmet. "The tactical overlay should be coming online now. You getting the HUD properly? Weakness analysis, threat assessment, the whole package?" "Let's find out," Henry said, his voice modulated through the armor speakers, as he turned his head, and every sensor embedded in the battle armor toward the rival team across the chamber. The heads-up display activated, streams of data cascading across his vision. But as his gaze swept across the NIVs, it lingered on one figure in particular. The overlay tried to process her form, but Henry found himself ignoring the technical readouts for just a moment. He knew her name was Yari. He'd done his research on the competition. Even with her pink skin adorned with the white stripes that ran like rivers across her body, a pattern common among her species, she commanded attention. She stood in her own prototype armor, but even the bulky plating couldn't hide the way she carried herself. Spine straight, shoulders back, and posture of a warrior who had learned to wield words as deftly as weapons. Her face, with its elongated features and pointed ears that gave her an almost elvish appearance, turned toward him. Their eyes met across the distance, and her thin lips curved into a mischievous smile that made Henry's pulse quicken beneath the armor's bio-monitors. "Henry!" Lucas's sharp voice crackled through the internal comm, shattering the moment. "The overlay, is it working or not? We don't have time for you to space out." Henry blinked, forcing himself to look at Yari with professional eyes this time. The tactical overlay immediately responded, highlighting points across her armor in glowing markers. A list materialized in the corner of his vision. Weakness assessment. Subject, NIV female. A-spot, compromised elbow joint, 67% vulnerability. B-spot, lateral armor thinning, structural weakness at 43%. C-spot, helmet seal, potential breach point. The list continued, each weakness cataloged in a compact list. "Yes, it's working," Henry said, his voice steady again. "I'm seeing multiple vulnerability points on their armor. A-spot shows a weak elbow joint, probably a design compromise for flexibility. B-spot indicates thinning on the lateral armor plating right side. The system's mapping everything." Lauren, the programmer, suddenly appeared at his shoulder, her tablet clutched against her chest. Her usually composed face showed cracks of worry. "Henry, listen, the code isn't perfect yet. We rushed the final optimization for this presentation." She lowered her voice, glancing nervously at the NIV team. "You can't be 100% reliant on the overlay. When you and that NIV woman are presenting to the Queen, if the system glitches and you make a mistake," she paused, swallowing hard, "you could make Earth look incompetent. We'd lose the deal and worse, our reputation in this entire planet." Henry turned to face her, the armor's servos whirring quietly with the movement. His smile was visible through the helmet's transparent faceplate. "Lauren, relax. How many hours do you think I've logged in this armor? 304? He lifted his armor hand, flexing the fingers, showing his perfect control. I've worn this thing so long I can feel when the gyroscopes are off by 1/10 of a degree. I've developed a sixth sense for when the sensors glitch. That little flicker in the peripheral vision, that half-second delay in the haptic feedback, trust me, I know this armor better than I know my own body at this point. The minutes crawled by as both teams made their final preparations. Engineers on both sides ran through checklists. Technicians polished armor plates that already gleamed, and programmers hunched over tablets, making last-second adjustments that probably wouldn't matter. The tension in the chamber grew thicker with each passing moment. Then, without warning or fanfare, the main doors swung open with a grinding sound that spoke of ancient hinges and purposeful intimidation. The Queen of Zorar entered, her entourage flowing behind her like a tide of silken ceremony. She didn't spare a single glance at either team, her pace unhurried and her conversation with her advisors continuing, as if the chamber held nothing more interesting than furniture. Her blue skin had the weathered texture of age, and short horns protruded from her skull, where hair might have grown on a human. The gray undertones in her complexion spoke of decades, perhaps centuries of rule. She took her time ascending the throne, each step without hurry, her robes trailing behind her, pressing down against the cushioned floor. Henry caught Yari's eye again across the space. This time their shared look held no flirtation or competition, just a mutual recognition of their client's apparent disinterest. For a moment they were united in their distaste for the Queen's casual dismissal of their presence. That moment shattered when the Queen's voice cut through the chamber like a blade cutting through silk. "You too," she said, not even bothering to look directly at them, her tone filled with the kind of disrespect reserved for servants who'd tracked mud through the palace. "The armor markers, present yourselves." Henry's team clustered around him, hands patting his shoulders, voices overlapping, offering him whispered encouragement. "You've got this," Lucas said. "Show them what Earth can do," added another. They practically pushed him toward the platform that stood before the throne, their nervous energy propelling him forward. Across the chamber, Yari received no such warmth from her team. The other Nivs regarded her with cold, calculating eyes, not encouragement but expectation weighing in their gazes. Yet Henry could see the determination that hardened her features as she strode toward the platform. They stood side by side, two warriors in prototype armor, waiting for judgment from a queen who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The queen regarded them for a long moment, her ancient eyes moving slowly from one to the other. Then she turned to her advisors. "These two are truly the only competitors to supply modern armor to my royal army? In all the galaxy, these are my only options?" One advisor, a nervous-looking Zorarian with skin a shade lighter than the Queen's, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the distance of our planet from the core worlds limits our options. Many species have body configurations too different from Zorarians. The Bic Collective's armor wouldn't fit our bone structure. The water swimmer's suits require gills we don't possess. These two represent the best bipedal armor technology available." The Queen waved her hand dismissively, either accepting the explanation or simply growing bored of the conversation. "Fine, show me what these armors can do." Henry drew in a breath, ready to launch into his carefully prepared presentation, but Yari beat him to it. Her voice rang out clear and confident, filling the chamber with a sales pitch that flowed like music. "Your Majesty, the Niv defensive systems armor represents the pinnacle of protective technology. Our suit is completely heat-resistant, indestructible, water-resistant to pressures found in the deepest ocean trenches, fire-resistant to temperatures that would melt rocks." She moved as she spoke, the armor responding fluidly to demonstrate its flexibility. Internal temperature control keeps the wearer comfortable in any environment, from the frozen wastes to volcanic chambers. The strength enhancement triples the wearer's natural muscle strength, while our speed augmentation reduces reaction time by 60%. She paused, turned to look directly at Henry with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And unlike some others," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness, "it actually looks good on you." Henry caught the worried glances from his team. Lucas was biting his lip. Lauren clutched her tablet tighter, and the others shifted nervously. He could feel the momentum shifting against him. Yari's confident delivery putting him on the defensive, but Henry Lee hadn't gotten this far by folding under pressure. He stepped forward, letting his armor's heavier footfalls echo through the chamber. Your Majesty, while the Niv armor certainly has its merits, the human exoframe system offers abilities that transcend mere resistance to elements. He activated the 3D projector, displays materializing around him. Our stealth technology doesn't just hide you, it makes you effectively invisible across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The tactical overlay provides real-time weakness analysis of any opponent, turning every soldier into a master strategist. The display shifted, showing various vision modes cycling through. We offer more vision modes than any warrior could hope to use. Thermal, electromagnetic, heat detection, and many others. Yes, our armor also enhances strength and speed to similar degrees. He turned to Yari, matching her earlier smile. And while I can't deny the Niv armor looks good on her, I fail to understand what looks matter when you're invisible on the battlefield. His team gave him a subtle thumbs up, relief visible on their faces. Across the platform, Yari's confident expression showed worry, and her team had begun whispering among themselves. The Queen turned to her advisors, and what followed was perhaps the most disinterested discussion of military technology Henry had ever witnessed. The advisor spoke in low tones while the Queen examined her fingernails, occasionally nodding or shaking her head. Finally she spoke, her voice filled with the kind of boredom typically reserved for discussing weather. "Both sides speak wonders," she drawled, "but words are wind. I cannot choose before seeing how they fare in combat." Henry's stomach dropped. His mind raced through the implications. This was still a prototype, untested in real combat conditions. They'd prepared for a demonstration, a sales pitch, not a fight. "Your Majesty," he began, trying to keep the concern out of his voice. "With respect, this armor is still in prototype phase. While I have complete confidence in its capabilities, we need a few more days for final adjustments. Combat wasn't part of our original agreement." He turned to look at Yari, hoping for support, and added what he thought was a reasonable point. "And besides, you can't expect me to fight a woman." The change in Yari's posture was instant and dramatic. Her spine straightened, her hands curled into fists, and Henry could practically feel the temperature drop around her. From behind him, he heard Lauren's voice, low but carrying clearly through his calm. "Oh, Henry, you shouldn't have said that." He didn't even see the punch coming. One moment he was standing, trying to look diplomatic, and the next he was flat on his back, his head ringing from the impact of Yari's armored fist against his faceplate. The technical overlay went crazy, warnings flashing about incoming threats and structural impacts. As he lay there, staring up at the vaulted ceiling of the palace, a thought crystallized in his mind with perfect clarity. He had perhaps gotten himself into a very bad situation. He rolled to his feet, servos whining in protest, just in time to dodge another swing from Yari. Her face throughout her helmet was a mask of controlled fury. "You think I can't fight you because I'm a woman?" she snarled. "Let me give you a personal demonstration." Henry backpedaled, his mind switching from sales mode to survival mode. He circled her carefully, testing her reactions, watching how she moved in the armor. "Nice sucker punch," he called out, trying to keep his voice light, even as his heart pounded. "Do they teach that in Niv school?" "They teach us to finish fights," she shot back, lunging forward with a combination that would have been devastating if it had connected. "Unlike humans who apparently just talk." Henry ducked under her swing, his armor's predictive systems finally catching up to the situation. "Oh, we can do more than talk," he said, then activated his stealth mode. The shimmer started at his feet and rippled upward, his form becoming translucent, then transparent, then gone entirely. Yari spun, her helmet turning frantically as she tried to track him. The audience gasped. Even the Queen leaned forward slightly in interest. Henry circled her silently, his footfalls dampened by the armor's acoustic suppression. Then, quick as thought, he reached out and tapped her helmet. "Over here," he whispered, his voice projected to seem like it came from everywhere at once. She whirled, swinging at empty air. He was already behind her, tapping on her back. "Nope, over here now." "Stop playing games," she shouted, frustration bleeding through her professional composure. "But games are fun," Henry said, and in a moment of cockiness that he'd later regret, added, "I could have slapped lower if I wanted. The armor leaves some interesting gaps in coverage." That was his mistake. Yari stopped moving entirely, her body going still in a way that should have warned him. When he came in for another tap, she moved quickly, her hand shooting out to grab where she predicted he'd be based on his pattern. Her fingers closed on his invisible arm, and before he could react, she'd locked him into a grappling hold. The stealth field flickered and died as they crashed to the ground together, neither of them actual warriors despite their armor. What followed was less a dignified combat between advanced military technologies and more like watching two children wrestle over a toy. They rolled across the platform, each trying to gain advantage, armor scraping against armor with horrible grinding sounds. Henry tried to use his overlay to find a weakness, but Yari kept moving too erratically. She attempted to use her strength enhancement to overpower him, but his armor compensated automatically. They were locked in an ungainly tangle of limbs, both breathing hard when the Queen's voice cut through their struggle like ice water. "Are you fighting, or is this some kind of animal mating ritual I'm not aware of?" The entire chamber erupted in laughter. Advisors, guards, servants, everyone joined in the mirth at their expense. Henry and Yari froze, still entangled on the ground, both suddenly aware of how they must look. Their own team stood in utter silence, mortification written across every face. The Queen sat back in her throne, looking more amused than she had since arriving. She waited for the laughter to die down, one hand raised for silence. Henry and Yari remained on the ground, both too embarrassed to move first. "I remain unconvinced," the Queen announced, her tone suggesting she was enjoying this far more than the original presentation. "Each of you will present me with one final argument to help me make my decision. Choose your words or actions carefully." Henry and Yari scrambled to their feet, both trying to maintain some dignity despite being covered in dust and scratches. Henry's mind raced, trying to think of something compelling to say, but his breath came in ragged gasps. Then inspiration struck, or perhaps it was just exhaustion making him clever. "Ladies first," he wheezed, gesturing to Yari with mock gallantry. She saw right through it, of course. He was buying time to recover, making her speak while winded. But instead of calling him out, she smiled, a different smile than before, one that made Henry nervous. She walked slowly toward her team, her breathing evening out with each step. When she reached them, she retrieved something from a storage box, something that looked like an oversized toy gun, all bright colors and ridiculous proportions. She returned to the platform, raising the device toward Henry. "What?" Henry said, his tactical overlay completely failing to identify the weapon. "Are you going to shoot me now? After all that talk about superior armor?" "Yes," Yari said simply. "I am." She pulled the trigger. Henry expected plasma, expected bullets, expected some kind of energy discharge. What he got was water. Simple, plain water, like from a child's toy at a summer pool party. It splashed across his chest, running into the gaps between armor plates, seeping through seals that hadn't been properly finished. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sparks started. Electric arcs danced across his armor surface, systems shorting out one by one. His HUD flickered wildly, error messages cascading faster than he could read them. The strength enhancement died, making the armor suddenly feel like it weighed a ton. The tactical overlay gave one last valiant attempt at analysis before disappearing entirely. Yari didn't waste the opportunity. As Henry stood there, frantically trying to run diagnostics, she launched into her final pitch. "Your Majesty, the humans came here with a prototype, their own admission. Watch." She turned the water gun on herself, dousing her own armor thoroughly. Not a single spark, not one system failure. The NIV Defensive Systems team came with a finished product, tested and ready. The choice is obvious. The Queen turned her expectant gaze to Henry, waiting for his counter-argument. His team looked panicked, Lucas already pulling out his tablet to try to remotely reset the armor's systems. But Henry wasn't paying attention to them. He was staring at Yari through his flickered display, watching the overlay struggle to maintain its analysis. The weakness indicators were going crazy, letters and spots appearing and disappearing. But one kept drawing his attention. Not A spot or B spot, but specifically the letter G, glowing steadily on the side of her armor, even as everything else failed. The gears in Henry's head turned despite the pressure, despite the failing armor, despite everything, and suddenly he was laughing. He walked toward Yari, his armor heavy and dead, each step requiring enormous effort. She watched him approach with confident satisfaction, certain of her victory. The entire chamber held its breath. Henry reached out with one finger and tapped a spot on the side of her armor. "Found your G-spot," he said, with a smirk, knowing full well the innuendo, but not caring about professionalism anymore. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. Yari's armor began ejecting itself piece by piece, each section detaching and falling. Shoulder plates fell away, followed by chest pieces, leg guards, all of it clattering to the ground in a cascade of advanced technology suddenly turned useless. Yari stood there, eyes wide with shock, desperately trying to grab falling pieces while covering herself. She wore only a thin undersuit beneath her armor, designed for comfort, not modesty. Her team exploded into panicked shouting, some rushing forward to help, others frantically checking their tablets to understand what happened. Henry turned to the Queen, who was now sitting forward, genuinely interested for the first time. "Your Majesty, the Nivs also brought a prototype. A safety feature like that, instant armor ejection from a single touch, no finished military product would ever have such a vulnerability. They left in a testing feature, probably for quick removal during development." He gestured to his own dead armor. "Yes, mine has weaknesses too. Waterproofing wasn't complete, but in the end, both teams brought prototypes. Both adapted existing designs for this presentation. The Niv armor's weakness, however, isn't water. It's just a simple tap in the right spot." The Queen's expression went through several changes. Amusement, to annoyance, to outright anger. She stood from her throne, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of royal displeasure that had probably preceded executions in the past. "You dare," she began, her voice low and dangerous, "to come before the throne of Zoar with incomplete products? You waste my time with prototypes and call them finished? The disrespect shown to my people, to my crown, is too much." She gestured dismissively at both of them. "The humans claim superiority while wearing armor that fails at the touch of water. Water, the most common substance in many planets. And the Nivs, so proud of their resistance, built armor that abandons its wearer at a finger's touch." Henry and Yari exchanged a look, tired, embarrassed, but somehow finding a moment of camaraderie in their shared humiliation. The Queen's tongue-lashing continued, each word precise and cutting. "You treat the royal army of Zoar as if we are some backward planet, desperate for any technology. As if we would accept whatever scraps you design to throw our way. Both of you, leave. Take your prototypes, your sorry alien bodies, and your assumptions, and never darken my palace again. Zoar will find suppliers who respect us enough to bring finished products." The dismissal was absolute. Both teams began packing immediately, the earlier competition replaced by shared shame. Henry helped Yari gather the pieces of her armor. She'd managed to retrieve most of her undersuit's coverage, but her dignity would take longer to recover. She gave him a small nod of thanks, then returned to her team, who surrounded her protectively as they made her exit. Hours later, night had claimed the streets of Zoar's capital. The city was nothing like Earth's colonies. Organic architecture grew from the ground like massive shells, glowing panels providing soft yellow light that made everything look good. Henry walked aimlessly through the commercial district, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, replaying the disaster in his mind. His team had returned to their hotel, but Henry couldn't face sitting in a room with them, dissecting their failure. He wasn't even sure what he was doing out here. wandering alien streets where he could barely read the signs. Maybe he just wanted to find some local food, try to get something positive out of this planet before they skulked back to Earth empty-handed. A hand on his shoulder made him jump. He spun around, and there was Yari. She was alone. No armor, no team, just her. She wore traditional Niv clothing, flowing fabrics that wrapped around her body in complex patterns, leaving her arms bare to show the white stripes that spiraled down pink skin, like nature's own artwork. Her hair, which had been hidden under the helmet, fell past her shoulders in waves that seemed to move with their own rhythm. In the lights of Zoar's streets, she looked like something out of a dream. Alien, yes, but beautifully so. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice different without the armor's modulation. Softer, more gentle. "Maybe over a meal? I promise not to throw water on you." Henry found himself smiling despite everything. "Only if you promise not to hit me again. My face is still ringing." "You deserved it," she said, but she was smiling too. "Come on, I know a place." They walked together through the winding streets, neither speaking at first, but processing the day's events. The restaurant Yari led them to was small, quiet, tucked into a corner where 3 shell buildings grew together. The proprietor, an elderly Zorarian who looked like he might have served the Queen's grandmother, seated them in a corner booth without comment. The initial conversation was awkward, starts and stops, both of them dancing around the spectacular failure they'd shared. But then Yari asked a technical question about the stealth system, and suddenly they were deep in discussion about photon manipulation and sensor spoofing. That led to Henry asking about her armor's power distribution, which led to a detailed explanation of Niv energy matrices. "Your strength enhancement is actually brilliant," Henry admitted, gesturing with a local fruit that tasted like spiced pears. "The way you use the body's own electrical field to trigger the servos, we never thought of that." "I say the same thing about your tactical overlay," Yari countered, leaning forward. "Real-time weaknesses analysis? We've been trying to develop something similar for years. How did you manage the processing speeds?" "That's a secret," Henry said as he smiled. "But admit that the power draw is enormous. That's why the water—" He stopped, then laughed. "God, water. I can't believe water took me down." "I can't believe you found the emergency release," Yari said, shaking her head. "That was supposed to be hidden in the final version. It's just for testing in case someone gets stuck." "The overlay tagged it as your G-spot," Henry said, then colored slightly. I probably shouldn't have announced it quite like that." Yari laughed, really laughed, not the controlled sounds from earlier. "The Queen's face when you said it. I thought she was going to execute us both right there." "Well, she basically did," Henry pointed out, "verbally at least. I've never been so thoroughly destroyed by words before." "Animal mating ritual?" Yari quoted as they both dissolved into laughter, earning looks from other diners. As the evening wore on and local wine flowed, their conversation wandered from technical specifications to stories about their teams, complaints about the Queen, and increasingly personal topics. Henry learned that Yari had fought to lead this presentation against significant opposition. Female Nivs rarely took such prominent roles. Yari discovered that Henry had invested his entire life savings into this armor project, believing it would make his career. "So what now?" Yari asked eventually, swirling the remains of her local version of wine. "I go back home with nothing. My team will probably dissolve. 3 years of development, and it ends with me standing in my underclothes in front of royalty." Henry studied her for a moment, an idea forming. It was crazy, probably impossible, definitely inadvisable. He had had too much of this alien wine to be making business decisions. But something about the way she'd matched him move for move, the way her mind worked through technical problems, the way she was smiling sadly at her wine. "Come to Earth," he said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "What?" "I'm serious. Come to Earth, bring your team if they'll come. We'll combine our technologies. Your armor's resistance with our stealth and overlay systems. Start a company together." The words tumbled out faster as the idea solidified. "Think about it. Both of our teams together? We could create something actually revolutionary, not just adapted prototypes." "Henry," she started, but he was on a roll now. "Earth's military has deeper pockets than the deepest ocean trenches. They're always looking for advancement, and they don't care about ceremony like the Queen. With your armor's foundation and our technical overlay, we could create the perfect system. We already know each other's weaknesses, literally. We could eliminate them." Yari fell silent, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. The restaurant had grown quiet around them, most other patrons having left. Henry waited, his heart beating faster than it had during the fight. "Is this a business proposal?" she finally asked, not looking at him. "Or are you asking me on a date?" Henry's brain short-circuited. What? No, I mean—" He stopped, took a breath. "Maybe? Actually, yes, both. Definitely both. If you want, or just business, or—" She laughed, cutting off his rambling. "You're terrible at this." "Well, I'm better with armor than people," he admitted. "I noticed." She was quiet for another moment, then smiled, that mischievous smile from the palace. "I'll have to convince my team about the company. They're not going to be happy about partnering with humans, especially after today, but I'll come to Earth," she said, "even if it's just for the date." Henry felt something in his chest that had nothing to do with armor or technology or failed business deals. "Really?" "Really." She reached across the table and took his hand. Her skin was warmer than he'd expected, softer. "After all, you did find my G-spot, even if it was the wrong one." Henry turned red, but he was grinning. "I could help you look for the right one. I mean, if you... that came out wrong." She squeezed his hand, laughing. "Shut up before you ruin it." Later, much later, Henry would look back on this night and marvel at the irony. He'd come to Zorar seeking a contract that would set him up for life. He demonstrated armor that was supposedly indestructible, only to be laid low by water and humiliation. He'd failed completely in his original mission. But sitting in that restaurant with Yari, planning a future that seemed impossible and wonderful, he realized he'd gained something much better than any military contract. A partner who could match him thought for thought, who understood both his successes and failures, someone who could challenge him at work and in life as an equal. Her armor hadn't been indestructible. One tap in the right spot had brought it all crashing down. But sometimes, Henry would learn, the right kind of tap in the right spot at the right moment could build something much stronger than armor. They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked the streets until dawn, planning and dreaming and arguing about technical specifications. By the time Zorar's sun rose, a yellow giant that painted the shell buildings in bright light, they'd sketched out the basics of their company on a napkin in mixed human and Niv notation. 6 months later, Lee Yari Defense Systems would win the Earth Defense Force's largest contract in history with the perfect fusion of human and Niv technology. The armor was completely waterproof, had no emergency releases that could be accidentally triggered, and included both advanced stealth and comprehensive resistance systems. But that was still in the future. For now, Henry and Yari stood on an observation platform, watching the sunrise over an alien city, their hands linked, their failures behind them, and their future uncertain but shared. "We'll make a good team," Yari said softly. "That remains to be seen," Henry added. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up below them. Somewhere, the Queen was probably telling the story of the two incompetent armor manufacturers who turned her palace into a comedy show. Their teams were probably wondering where they'd disappeared to. But Henry had found something in that disastrous demonstration, something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Not just a business partner or a romantic interest, but someone who understood him, who could match his ambitions and complement his weaknesses. His armor had been defeated by water, and hers had failed at a single touch. But Henry and Yari? They were just getting started, and nothing in the universe was going to stop them now. After all, They'd already found each other's weak spots. Now it was time to build something stronger together.